Hello, everyone. Today, we are having a podcast for Everyday Ethics, and I am here with Will, Tyler, and my name is Kristen, and we are here to discuss the NCAA compensation.
All right. I'm Tyler here. And what we're really talking about, inherently is the NCAA makes millions of dollars off advertising and their TV contracts, and the schools involved make millions of dollars, for, the school and help boost attendance. And we're talking about how the employees who are the athletes, whether they should be paid or not. At the school at Fairfield, I do play a sport. I don't think I should be paid, but I think for the athletes that are, famous, at the college level, I think there is definitely a reason that they should be paid. And I think we should just dig into that a little more and, see what we think about it, the pros and cons of it. If you have anything to say, Will.
Yeah, Will here. I think that Tyler makes a really good point that the NCAA makes a lot of money off these guys. And yes, in return, they do get an education, but it is a serious question of whether they should be paid, especially since they see so much screen time and they're the ones that everyone is watching TV for. And I think that they deserve to advertise themselves, to be paid in some fashion. And I think that one of the major upsides of doing that is that I think that college athletes would actually want to stay in college longer or stay to finish college, because you hear about a lot of athletes who will end up leaving college midway through to go out and join the pros probably when they're too young. And then you hear about all these athletes later in life who they get injured or something happens in the pros and then they have nothing to fall back on. And it would be really helpful if they could fall back on an education to get a job and continue in life.
I think at its core, I think, labeling these guys as amateurs is I think the problem that the NCAA has. I mean, just the mantra that these guys are amateurs and they live by it. They, spend a lot of money on advertising to say that these guys are amateurs. It's just to not pay them, and, so they can kind of just keep more money for themselves. I think a lot of the stuff they criminalize at the college level, a lot of the rules, like when Jameis Winston took crab legs, I don't know if you remember that.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're a professional there, there's no big deal. Like you can take free stuff. They were giving it to them. They said it later in the thing, like all the Florida State guys, you should just take free food. Like they let them. But because that's like an NCAA violation, like because the place can't give him like all that food, he got to take it like on his own rep, like he was stealing it. So it's like stuff like that. Like at a pro level, you can take stuff for free. Like, they used to give like tattoos to the Ohio State players for free and whatnot. Like it's all cool, but at the college level, because you're an amateur, you can't take that stuff. And then these guys are criminals and it's hurting their pro chances. It just doesn't really make any sense. And while, you make more money off a lot of these college sporting events than you do off pro events. And college football and college basketball are more watched than some of the professional sports. So
college football is.
Yeah. So, it's gambled on just as much or more than it's a bigger industry. So it's kind of ridiculous that, these guys don't get paid. Like it's just wild.
Yeah. And one thing also too is, really, a lot of these colleges, their communities built around these football teams. I know, especially with Texas schools, Texas A&M, Syracuse. Actually, my friends at Syracuse, they have a big football following, and all the students get involved, and it really creates not just a unity within the school, but also the surrounding community with the adults and other people who are working around the area. And I think that the fact that they get so much entertainment from these players and they don't see a nickel of the ticket sales or anything. Yeah. It's crazy.
I think you.
So I was in Miami this past weekend at the FSU game, and we don't experience sports here at all. And it was my first big game, and it's a huge production. And we were at a bar earlier in the week, and they're celebrities there. It's insane. It was the guy, he just got drafted for the Patriots, and he had straight A's at Miami, and he graduated. It was like alumni weekend. I'm not sure if you know his name, but it was like he was like holy in the thing. So I guess my question I would have to like pose to you guys, like, what is the line to pay the athletes? Like, would they be in the Big Ten only, or
I think it would have to be D1 schools, right?
all D1 schools, all D1 athletes?
I kind of feel like that's ridiculous at some point, because this is Division I school, and like all the sports
Right.
program, like I know for a fact here that all the sports programs don't make money for the school. Like they don't. Like they cost the school money. So like I don't really understand the conversation there. It really doesn't make any sense to me. But like I feel like if a school's turning a profit, then it's your duty, I feel like, to pay them, because if you're going to make money off it, then I feel like that just makes sense.
Well, this brings up another great idea, kind of for the contrary in terms of the ethics, which is if schools would offer athletes money to high schoolers, because if they did pay their college athletes, when you're trying to go to college, schools, when they're recruiting you, they would say, hey, we'll pay you this
Like a
much.
signing bonus or something.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that would also make it's not fair to the athlete, because they might end up going to a school that necessarily isn't the best fit for them academically, but they would go there because they're getting the biggest paycheck, or they need the paycheck. And also all the bigger schools with the most money would get the best players.
Yeah.
Because they can afford them. And I think that's really interesting that they would be able to, if they were able to pay their athletes, that they could essentially change someone's life, just going to a completely different school.
Yeah, I think an interesting point in that too is that for basketball and football, to get to the pro rank, right now you still have to go to college. You have to have a year at high school. Like they don't draft basketball players at a high school anymore, and they don't draft football players at high school. You got to play 2 years. So it's almost like a minor leagues for the pros. So like they have no choice. They have to go to college, these kids. So it kind of like some guys can go pro right out of high school. Like they got a guy at Duke, Zion Williamson. He was a #1 recruit. He could have been drafted. He could have been the first pick in the NBA draft last year. He's at Duke. So like he's taking a year that he could get paid easily. He could be in the NBA right now, and he's not getting paid. He's just playing basketball on a scholarship that doesn't mean anything to him, because he's obviously leaving next year. And now a lot of college basketball programs promote one and done. They recruit guys solely based off you'll come here for 1 year and then we'll send you to the pros. They don't even want you for 4 years anymore. Like that's how you get the best players now. You just serve it as a stepping stone. So like what is the real purpose? The college knows they're not there for the education. So then why?
Well, some athletes.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say all athletes are
Not all.
there for the education.
Yeah. But it's kind of ridiculous when a school will recruit based solely off 1 year. We'll have you for 1 year and we'll send you to the pros. Like that, you're literally just saying you don't care about the education. You just want what this guy's bringing you for a year. Winning games, press, it's just like you look at the Duke basketball Instagram page. They got like 2 million followers or something. Like it's wild.
Yeah.
They're celebrities.
Like you were saying, they just kind of want that recognition on the big screen. Because we were saying college sports are some of the most watched things. No one watches like minor league basketball. You're way more likely to be seen in March Madness.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really how you get your name out there too and get to the pros. So yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Also, another topic would be with college athletes being paid, you would really create a divide, not only within the team, but also in the community, because you'd have players having to be paid more than others for how well they play. And I mean, would they be making more than their teachers? Would they be making more than maybe a coach? It would really depend on how much the schools would be willing to pay them. And I think that it would actually be a large amount of money, because it's for some schools, like their football programs, a lot of schools are known for one thing, and if they're really known for that, they're going to be willing to pay those athletes a lot to keep that running.
Yeah. And you also have to think about brands and stuff like Nike and Adidas. Once that would be opened up, you would assume on big time campuses, they'd be there every day trying to recruit athletes to, wear their shoes or do a commercial, which would also be a kind of a crazy dynamic for a college, because you still are in college. I know when Johnny Manziel was on his Heisman run, he had to withdraw from all his classes, and just take him from his house because he used to go to class and he couldn't do anything. People would be trying to sign autographs. I went down to my freshman year. We played Texas Tech, and the whole economy of that town is based around Texas Tech. When we got in the hotel, they had a 10 Commandments pillar. It said for God in Texas Tech. It was in on Texas Tech logo. I mean, it's kind of wild down. You don't really realize it, when you don't go to a big SEC or Big Ten or school like that. But these economies are run by these sports programs. I mean, they try to think maybe it's the school, but it's really the sports program. And then you start paying these guys, then they already feel like they can do no wrong. They got all this money.
And they're so young too. They're
Yeah.
our age. I wouldn't know what to do with all that money.
Well, that's another thing is, should they be paid? Because will they know what to do with it? Because, I mean, just personally, I know if I was making even close to what pros were making, I probably would not be spending it the most logically. So I can assume that there would definitely be some college athletes. I mean, even pros. There are a lot of pros that waste their money and end up bankrupt with how much money they're making. And they're older too. So,
Well, yeah, maybe there's an ethical problem with paying them while they're in college, but maybe a way of around that would some type of way finance that so they could have the money maybe 10 years later. They should, I feel because I do think that guys that are worth it and bring value to the school should probably get paid. Maybe withdraw the money, 5 years later when maybe they get it when they graduate or something. That could be an interesting kind of way to do it, because it's you're getting the money, but you don't have it while you're there, but you're still getting compensated for what you did and the value you brought. I mean, you bring value to a business, you should get paid for it. And that's what it is at the end of the day. It's a business.
Yeah, but going off that, so let's say they were, they go to a school and they'll say, we'll give you this much money when you graduate if you play for us. And let's say in their sophomore year, they have a serious injury. Would the school still be obligated to pay them? And like you were saying before, how a lot of these schools, they'll only pay for your medical treatments while you're in college.
Yeah.
And then once you're out, if it's a really serious injury, it's not their problem anymore.
Yeah. That is an interesting issue, because, they bring these guys in and they're the ones putting them on the field and, getting the money off it. And then if you get hurt, there's 50 other guys on the roster to take your spot, and they can cut you and they can do whatever they want. You have all of these rules where a coach can go from one contract to another, $1 million here, $1 million there. But if a kid who's getting unpaid wants to transfer to a school in his conference, he's got to knock on coach's door, and coach got to allow him to transfer. And I know Nick Saban a couple of years ago just didn't let a kid transfer. So the kid had to sit on the bench and not play. Where you don't really have any rights there. You're not getting paid, and if you don't like the school, you can't transfer. It's
you
kind
have
of
to
a
ask
wild
permission to transfer.
Yeah,
you have to ask your coach.
Yeah, if you're trying to transfer within conference, you have to have permission. Even at this level, if I were to try to transfer to Iona or Manhattan or Quinnipiac or something, I'd have to ask coach. I mean, usually they let you do it, but I mean, they very easily could just say no. And I mean, those are some of the rules that just kind of make no sense.
Ugh,
and that's why sometimes it's they kind of take advantage of these guys, because they have so much control over them, and they don't even compensate them.
That's really interesting that rule is in effect, because I was thinking about before with the whole argument on whatever schools could pay more would pay those athletes. So let's say you were unhappy with your pay at one school, so you wouldn't be able to transfer to another school for the pay unless your coach
at all.
unless your coach let.
Yeah. You can transfer out of conference though, but there's only so many marketable conferences that can make money.
Right. Yeah.
And that too. If you're in the SEC, that's probably where you want to be.
Big 12.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's an interesting kind of dilemma there, for sure.
Would you talked about Texas Tech? Would paying the players detract from their economy? Would they have less money to pour back into the stadium?
I mean, these infrastructures at these schools are incredible. The amount of money they make. When we were at Texas Tech, they were building a whole new athletic complex. The stadium's bigger than most pro stadiums. I mean, you drive in and they're tailgating, I mean, it's all they do. I mean, it's kind of crazy that, it's not just entertainment. It's like a way of life for these guys. And these athletes, I mean, they enjoy it while they're there, but like they're working hard.
Yeah, it's tough because I feel like they deserve something. They deserve to be paid, but also on the other side of things, you have to get that money from somewhere, and those funds would come from somewhere else in the college's budget. So you'd be taking that either away from like rooming, from teacher pay, somewhere else. So I feel like it'd be interesting to see what would happen if they ended up allowing NCAA to pay athletes. But
I mean, there was an interesting when UConn won the national championship in basketball a couple of years back. Shabazz Napier, he got on the mic and he was saying in his victory speech, he was saying how there was like a lot of nights that he didn't have enough money in college to get food. Like he'd go to bed hungry. Like he wasn't even getting enough money to get food at the catering hall. Like he had 2 meals a day and he didn't have enough money to buy food. And then they changed the rule a couple years later where now like you get unlimited meals if you play sports. I guess like if you're on scholarship at a D1 school, you get unlimited meal swipes or whatever. Which like beforehand, that's kind of a wild notion. Like they won the national championship. That means they played all through March Madness. They made all the money off that, and their best player was going to bed hungry a lot.
Yeah.
Which is wild because you think these guys are treated so well and whatnot, but are they really?
Yeah.
If you can't even like eat, and the NCAA doesn't think about that until very recently, which is kind of a crazy notion.
Right. Well, it ties back into like a lot of these kids too. Like they get the full scholarship to come to the school, but I mean, sometimes the reason they take the full scholarship and go to that school is because they can't afford to go to a different school. Sometimes you're coming from like a lower income household and you have to make decisions. And with Shabazz Napier, I mean, if you can't afford to like eat, but you're playing on one of the best teams, I mean, he deserves to be paid something.
And it also puts a lot of the athletes in weird situations with all that and still not being paid. Like Reggie Bush, when he won the Heisman, like he was from poverty almost, and they offered to buy his mom a house, and he said yeah, and like some guy bought him a house, and then a year later they took away his Heisman because of it. And like that puts the guy 19, 20-year-old kid in a weird situation,
Right.
because you didn't ever have a house for your mom and someone offers it, you're gonna say no, and then he says yes, and then they make him seem like a criminal because of it. But like he just, I mean, there's nothing criminal about someone buying your mom a house, but I mean that's how they kind of spun it off, and they took it back, and his name's not on the Heisman, like he doesn't have it anymore. It doesn't mean anything to him. He had a good NFL career, but it's kind of wild to think that they could do that to you.
Another thing we should talk about is the Title IX law, which what is that again?
It's just so at every school you have the equal amount of male sports programs as women programs. And when that came into effect, some schools had to cut male programs to equal with women programs, or maybe cut a women's program because you had too many women, not enough male. That probably didn't happen as much, but they had to cut male programs to equal the women's programs.
Yeah, and I feel like just paying the male athletes I'm just gonna pretend like we are at like Oklahoma. If they paid the men's like football athletes, or we can pretend it's basketball because there's a women's team, how would that work out? And I think a lot of like females would be outraged at that, like just because they're bringing in that many people. But if the women brought in a lot of people to a UConn game when they won the championship, like they should be paid as much as the men who won the championship, and the same amount of people came to the game. I think that would bring just so much drama, and I don't think the NCAA wants to deal with that.
I think an interesting point there too is that women's college basketball is more watched than women's pro basketball. So that's kind of a wild note. Like UConn, more people know UConn's women's basketball than the WNBA team. So like there's more people watching college women's basketball, and those girls aren't getting paid. And then you go to the WNBA and you get paid, but the viewership isn't as much. So you have so much more, revenue at the college level. So you could make more money. Like March Madness with women, it's nationally broadcasted. it's watch. Like people tune in to watch that more than WNBA playoffs. But those girls aren't getting paid, so it gives them an opportunity to get paid for their athletic, prowess throughout their college career, and they're getting that kind of stolen from them almost, which is an interesting point. I mean, so I think that's also an interesting point to touch upon.
Do you guys have any other points, William and Tyler?
Or Haley.
Oh, Haley, do you have something to say?